So anyway, we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to get us going on the next session. So please do go ahead and use the chat panel, ask any questions, send anything through as we're going, and really looking forward to this session.
Good morning, everyone. This is Bhuvan. My name is Bhuvan. I'm the current CTO of Programmers.io. We're going to look into the role of JavaScript in the modern workplace today. And this is a topic which fascinated me for quite some time. As a leader of large development teams, I was always kind of wondering, and what's happening with the JavaScript? So let's get into that. How many of you seen this? If you have seen this, you are in my age group most likely, where we had a fascinating run from like the Java days, Java applets, and then the JavaScript, then the famous Netscape uh, Navigator. I think the Navigator 9 is the last version after which it almost died, right? So those are fun days. Back then, JavaScript was very exciting, and uh, like most people, I started. It's in '95. This got launched, and around the same time, like a Java launched, right? So it's like people were always confused. You know, Java was developed by Sun Microsystems, JavaScript by Brandon Each at Netscape, which is launched as a browser. So always confused that Java and JavaScript as related, although they were completely different uh, projects. It came out around the same time, and the JavaScript provided a fancy way to act. And the JavaScript was the only way for the Java code to access the DOM back then. Now, to get into the history, which is 95, JavaScript launched. Primary reason is we used JavaScript back then is the bridge between the Java applets and the DOM. We had an interesting run of the project, but back in the days, this is before XML, this is uh, before the current, Ajax and stuff. Applets were launched in the browser and later proved to be a disaster because of security reasons. But back then, that was a cutting edge technology. This is back to before even Flash came out. It's the only way to access the DOM. Then JavaScript, then the Netscape died. Oh, JavaScript died because Netscape collapsed, and that was we thought that was the end. And then because at the time the Microsoft didn't support JavaScript, they had their own thing, VB That didn't go well. But when Mozilla, in 2004, when Google got into conflict with, they wanted to launch Gmail, or I think the first one was Google Maps. It used to be called Keyhole, and they wanted to roll out the web version of it, and they could not make it work on Internet Explorer, the very famous Internet Explorer. I think that led to Google acquiring Mozilla, JavaScript, giving it to Mozilla, not the JavaScript, Google acquiring Netscape, donating it to Mozilla, like, you know, creating the Firefox browser. But at the same time, Google, owned JavaScript pretty much and went through like, you know, now you see what we have today. Fun fact, your JavaScript is actually registered trademark of Oracle. Used to be for some systems which get inherited by Oracle. So when you use JavaScript, just be cautious. There are trademark issues there. Now there is kind of no owners of the JavaScript, but you know, then you look into it's like, now how did it became where it, how it became what it is today? Now, first major breakthrough since its inception was the creation of Node.js. It has escaped the browser, became the desktop script, and Electrona added the UI capabilities, desktop capabilities, Visual Studio Code, which is entirely built in JavaScript and TypeScript, is the most popular development environment. Those things actually contributed to where the JavaScript is today, resulting into by far the most popular language. Oh, by the way, in this chart, what the heck is LUI? I don't know. It's a popular thing. I never heard of it before looking at this chart. So anyway, now JavaScript is ubiquitous today. So it's the language of choice for the UI development. I don't think there is any alternative today, in fact. That's the only language which you can use it for UI development. Irrespective of whether you wanted to build the desktop applications, to the point that even Microsoft dumped their own languages XAML and whatever those things VB and other C sharp C sharp based UI generations. They're pretty much kind of deprecated. Now JavaScript React is the primary platform for Microsoft, even Microsoft UI development. And it is the only full stack development environment language that works on all platforms. And physical process automation triggered, somebody created, this is a fun part. When I was looking at ESP32 Node, it was like JavaScript, they're like, oh, you can do it JavaScript, C and the JavaScripts are the only ones, kind of a Raspberry Pi, kind of a programming. So it ended up as okay, you can apply JavaScript everywhere. Not everywhere, we'll get to the other one. These days, kids are programming robots using JavaScript. So Cyclone, Johnny 5, it's, it's pretty fun. You know, building automation, autonomous robots to applications, full stack application development, and think of it as everywhere in between. You can use JavaScript, and that's primarily one good reason to learn, right? There is no barriers of oh, I need to know several languages. So today, when developers ask why do you use, right? It's a cross-platform, only cross-platform language. Uh, so over time, it developed into a language that you cannot deliver any application to end user without it. Obviously, the front end is an all JavaScript these days. I haven't seen any other language which you can build a UI. I think there are a few others, but rarely with any significance. Now it's the messiest. One of the things evolution, JavaScript was not intended to be a language that you want to do all these things doing today. So there is no type system in the most messiest one. So it's people just added features random, as if it started as regular, you know, a regular programming language like C. I don't know what it's called, but now they added an object-oriented paradigm, then functional paradigm. You name it, it just added, and so much shortcuts. There is no clear syntactical and syntax enforcement. All those things resulted in like a messy programming language. you know, it's interesting that when we talk about me as a grew up in India with proper phonetical language, we look at English as like why are there no rules? People just randomly use English in random ways. JavaScript is no different. It just evolved into a messy programming language, like as whatever you want to do. Until something else stronger comes up, and which is very unlikely because of the popularity. But you never know, right? Like in a quantum computing, which they might come up like with a significantly different paradigm. Until then, JavaScript is, you cannot get around JavaScript like usage, deliver something without using JavaScript. One of the areas where we think about is Microsoft apps. If you go to any business environment, you will have Microsoft apps. Pretty much like maybe 95%. Very few companies uses Google, but we'll get to that. So, but how did this happen, right? Microsoft had the scripting language of VBA. It was very good. But in around 2003 or so, Microsoft introduced JavaScript as as a replacement for VBA. As a both were working in 2003, I think Office 2003, they introduced JavaScript, but they did not have the recording capabilities. You could write JavaScript code, and on top of the VBA engine, it worked. Not as good as VBA. Nobody used it. And I think in 2008, they removed JavaScript support. And then several iterations later, 2016, JavaScript is back in a very different way. It did not have the record macro capabilities until 2020, 2021, I think. But and then in 2016, they had the web add-ins where you can develop an add-in in JavaScript, and that could work on mobile and desktop together, or the web Excel, right? Web apps, like a web version of the Microsoft apps. Today it's near parity. It has achieved near parity with VBA. It's near parity. You cannot still do some of the things in JavaScript, but again, at the same time, VBA add-ins doesn't work, macros doesn't work on the web, so there is a balancing act there. But it is still today what you can do with JavaScript in Microsoft apps is incredible, and the capability to record macros that used to be similar to that was in VBA was phenomenal, and that is giving some of the boost to the JavaScript use in there. But at the same time, it adds a lot of capabilities like in productivity capabilities, right? It's like you're adding superpowers to your productivity in the business process. So the same thing, those superpowers, like in back in early 2000s, if you know macros, you are like superstar working on the financial side. Now you could do that. You can say that for the same thing in for the people who know JavaScript in the business environment. Again, they don't need to be an expert. They just need to understand the basics and use the script writer. The automations basically are delivered through these things. Like in Microsoft 365, you have Script Lab, you know, JavaScript code generators, Excel web add-ins, web scripts, and serverless are functions. It just takes things to a whole different level. Now, what if you're using Google Apps, right? Google Workspace, you have the Google App Script. They've been doing this like from the beginning. JavaScript was the language of choice on the Google application suite. Uh, Again, I've seen people writing phenomenal applications. They showed miracles in on the Google platform. However, Very few people use Google Apps Script, but yet like it adds so much capabilities to the Google application suite. Now, another game changer there is the low-code apps. So the construct of low-code apps itself is anybody like with a basic understanding of your applications, like a basic understanding of your business process, and you can build an app using drag and drop, uh, capabilities of the applications. Now, every low-code app, vendor like Microsoft, Appian, Google, Salesforce, all of them do say that like, oh, we can build your app by drag and drop. But I haven't seen an application built without writing few lines of code. Wherever there is a logic need to be applied, designers fail. So that's where the JavaScript capabilities comes into play. As anybody who is a tech savvy business user, you want he or she want to create uh, create an app, like pilot an app. It doesn't need to be a full enterprise grade app, but like just to test out the business process, right? Like any of the automations. You could build a simple form, collect the data, and like apply some logic. Knowing JavaScript will give you enormous capabilities. So it's a between like getting into a roadblock frustrations to getting things done. And then once the app is working, the construct is working, they can hand it over to product professional developers. However, just that is where like your opportunity lies in low code apps area. So it's like you're looking at the spectrum of the things what someone knowing basics of JavaScript like and little bit of a confidence can achieve in to automate business process. Either it is office productivity apps like Google Apps or Microsoft 365, like Microsoft Office, or the low code apps, and the combination of all of them, combination of both sides, give you incredible capabilities to and productivity boost to employees. So now another area like where we have is AI. Everybody talks. You go to ChatGPT, give some script, ask some question, it comes up. But what about like what do you do with that? How do you integrate into the uh, automation or the workflow itself? There comes the script. So JavaScript, like where there is an API, you can use JS, right? Like JavaScript. Whether you use it through as a Node.js, like just automation for the background services, serverless functions, or like integrate into part of as part of like Office apps, like in an Excel, like get the information through, or like in a Word document, right? Like you put in a small add-in, like where you can do large language models to write some contents into a Word document or a PowerPoint document. Having today having an JavaScript capability, like you can write code, like call a simple API, like you can make bring in a lot of automation and capabilities. Now, you know, writing the script itself can be automated, right? Like, but you need to understand it's about write small script to actually regenerate the scripts and so on. A lot of complicated, like, innovative ideas you can come up with. But that basic, understanding of how a programming language works and, how to use the JavaScript in that context gives you, like, unlocks your capabilities there. And it's a huge confidence booster. This is my favorite, uh, discovery recently is I was looking for desktop automation. Like, what if you don't have, what if you don't have APIs? Is there an opportunity for JavaScript, like if you know JavaScript, where you can use? Yes, the Node.js, the slogan is it's a hard nut to crack. I think that's something like that. But that gives you, but Node.js is the one like which provides desktop automation, where you need to do the only way to automate is passing on the clicks and keyboard keystrokes. Node.js will basically help you automate that. Yes, there are better platforms like Python can do better automation. C Sharp is there. If the desktop automation side. However, if you know JavaScript, you can also do this along with every other things which we can, went through during this presentation. Now, if you if you automate your grunt work, like clicks, like in legacy applications you have deal with, like in AS400, um, and or like in other screens, like where you cannot integrate them, you could bring in some automation using scripting, Node.js with Node.js, right? There are tooling like uh, RPA tools. Definitely, this is not a substitute, but to the basic automations you wanted to do, you can achieve with like scripting without the necessity of learning other tools. Like you can just build up the entire stack in a single language, is the point. Now, there are things coming to, we get like, oh, you can do all the things. Like, and this is a common theme which we always use. Oh, I can do that like with whatever I know, right? However, now come to like, is there anywhere like, we should not use JavaScript for? Yes, I know definitely one case where you should not be using JavaScript. And this is like in broad scope. JavaScript, when numerical calculation comes, it mostly works. It has a very messy type system where like it's unpredictable behavior when you're looking at like integers versus different sizes of floating point numbers. It's a mess. It mostly works though. A lot of people argue with me. It's like, no, it works with me. It's like, yes. But I have seen financial, like I myself has been working on this like, for 20 years in the financial space. Trust me, you don't want to build a tax calculation system or financial system using JavaScript. There is only one area where it is reliable. Like, I've used it in Excel. Surprisingly, it's reliable in the scope of Excel, but that's also coming up with a lot of capabilities of Excel itself. They might have fixed that within that context, but outside that, I would not advise JavaScript for numerical calculations, like where, especially in the financial calculation area or scientific numerical calculations. It's not meant for that. The type system doesn't support it. Use it with caution. You know, simple things like, people always says like, but use it with caution. Now, coming to, should we teach the JavaScript in schools? Hell yes, it should be. Uh, I have a daughter who knows. I have two daughters, but like, my elder one, she knows JavaScript and she likes it. Also, she knows other languages, but like, yeah, she was taught from early childhood. It's kind of natural, and I expect like, JavaScript should be taught in schools. But first, we need to figure out how to teach the difference. Like, as I said, like there are do not use cases and imperative versus functional programming construct, like how to differentiate. Most of the times, like, schools teach like something simpler languages like Python, which is very easy to explain because there is not much of the difference. If you do one way, it behaves a different. Like there's so much variations, right? So that's one of the challenges you're going to get with JavaScript, but honestly, it should be taught in schools early on. Like, it became so ubiquitous. We should be teaching them. So now the question comes up is, did it reach the cult status yet? And we have some programming languages which has that cult status. That's, I don't think so. JavaScript, I haven't seen any JavaScript developer who's passionate about JavaScript, always frustrated. But, you know, like you don't get that hardcore developers of JavaScript like the ones you get from, like, if you ask a Python developer or a Java developer, they are so passionate. You don't get that passion in JavaScript developers, and that's a good thing. Now, coming to how do we, being a JavaScript developer, how do we be a rock star? Convince your customer, business users to learn JS. Give them some confidence. If they understand coding, they propose more projects. It creates more opportunities. It creates more opportunities for you. With that, I would like to take some questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bhuvan. That's a really interesting discussion. And I'm sure it's going to feed a lot of thought on different things from different people. So, um, let's see. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So yeah, let's have a quick look at any of the questions that have popped up so far. Yeah.
There was a question on who did acquire Netscape. That was it's actually AOL which acquired Netscape. Then in 2003 or 2004, uh, that was actually transferred over to Mozilla with the help of Google funding, and Google funded the Mozilla open source project to create Firefox, and that was the trigger point. Main reason was they're not confident on Microsoft to launch their application suite Google Plus, and also Keyhole, which is Google. Back then, it was Google Maps and the Google suite of applications that includes today's Google Workspace.
Cool. That's some pretty deep knowledge there. Yeah, it's certainly been around and moved around. Now, you kind of see that with technologies. It's quite interesting to look at how a number of technologies have come and how they've kind of evolved over time, and then where they've kind of re-emerged and kind of get going.
Yes.
There's a lot of people kind of getting very excited about Python at the moment. This wonderful new language that's been around longer than most of other ones that have been out there as well. So um, I think there's certainly a lot of I think a lot of the languages now are pretty well matured and have been around for a long time. I think, as they say in technology, it normally takes 10 years for something to start getting to the point it's standardized. And I think certainly what you covered at the start of the session really, showed how those early kind of, okay, well, we've got a need to do something, because those early kind of battles going on kind of played through before we started getting something that's standardized down, which is kind of cool.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, yeah, we have another question here. Yeah, how do you record generate JavaScript code with macro recorders in MS Office?
So recently, about 2 years ago, they launched this tab called Automate inside Microsoft Web Apps, like web version of Excel, Office, Excel, and now it's available inside the desktop version as well in the newer Microsoft 365 versions. So in Automate, if you or doing like VBA, you record from the VBA panel, but for JavaScript, you do it through Automate tab on the toolbar. So it has a pretty good script manager where you click on record, do the things, and it will basically create script for all those actions, like replay those actions within Excel.
Okay, cool. I'm talking of Excel. Okay, that leads nicely onto one of the other questions that's here. How powerful is the JavaScript API on the Microsoft Office suite now?
That's it's evolving. It's there pretty much. The one thing you cannot do is open a new workbook or create a new workbook. But beyond that, we can do everything within the scope of the workbook. So that the only limitation of JavaScript today, JavaScript, either scripting or the web add-ins, is you can it works within the workbook or the document level. There is no equivalent of application scoped like in VBA. You could do like, oh, open, create new workbook, create new instance, spin off work tabs into new sheets into new workbooks. That capability is not there. Those are application scoped functionality. That's except that, like in everything else you could do. But one important thing is you can call APIs outside VBA. It's kind of tricky. APIs or cross application, like especially like in a hand off some of the tasks to Power Automate and come back in. That's available. Access to the Graph API is available, which is pretty incredibly powerful. So that gives you a lot of scope from like building like a full-fledged applications within Microsoft Office suite.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think it's certainly quite interesting to see. Obviously, when you're working with stuff that's predominantly running from browsers, you then having to be aware that you're running on different platforms potentially, and then each platform is very different in terms of what's running underneath the hood. So I know certainly where there's been a lot of common ActiveX controls that Microsoft have had for their suites in the past, they've not always had those for other platforms. So yeah, I think that's probably part of the limiting factor in terms of what is being made available to date, just because of the needs of the different platforms you're running out across.
Yes, and that's one of the important things, right? Like when you build an
Yeah.
application within Office or like using Excel or PowerPoint, one of the recent favorite applications we built was deliver the content straight to PowerPoint for a sales team. Think of a sales team as like, oh, they're meeting a customer, and 5 minutes before they can completely create an deck, refresh the deck with data, real-time data, and present to the customer. And they could do that now on an iPad, which is a mobile platform from anywhere they are. Like that was not possible with the previous technologies within Microsoft Office suite. So we, we've seen a difference. Like there are limitations, but like to the most part, like customers are extremely happy with those kind of delivery through that strategy of application building. The back end you use same like Node.js or anything you want. The front end, like when you're building an application, either in Excel or or in PowerPoint, you can use most of the components which comes with popular UI technologies like React or any of these things. You can use components, and so that enables you to work beyond the capabilities of Excel or PowerPoint itself and render straight in PowerPoint, which is PowerPoint or Excel, which is incredible. And customers doesn't need to know how you built it. It just works, right? Like you can create magic, like do magic there.
Yeah, there's a question here about can AI tools like ChatGPT enhance the quality of JavaScript code creation? And that's quite actually an interesting question, because we had a whole session yesterday, Raul, if you didn't see it, that Andres Filber did on using ChatGPT to build a Sencha application, and getting it to learns a lot from documentation and from online resources and forum answers and stuff that have been created in the past. to feed through and be able to generate code. And he was able to kind of generate some application code up pretty quickly. And get it to refine what it was creating as well. But it's an interesting question, if that is actually better quality code, because obviously it depends on what it's, with anything with AI, what it's been built on and what it's been trained on. And also, depends on the kind of coding standards that you want to use in house. So, is kind of the whole AI use and something for generating code something that you and your team have been looking at all?
Yes. And that's one of the things. If you don't adopt AI, like, and if you can't use, how are you going to generate customer value to the customer, right? So it's like previously a week, a developer would spend a week to generate some of the code which ChatGPT would generate in like an instance, right? Like in a couple of minutes. And that's a huge productivity booster. Now, the second thing comes up is how do you use it? What is the quality of it? It's no different than previously people used to go to various chats, forums and get ask help from somebody. You get the code. They try to use it in their applications. The key is the quality. It doesn't matter. Do you understand what it wrote? Is what matters, right? So as of now, you can train on your application, some of the tooling, Copilot can actually learn how your coding practices are. But to the most part, it is generating code without context. Now it's the job of the developer to understand that code, retranslate that, and make it workable in your context, in your project. So that onus still goes on to the developers. And that's one of the things which we are doing at our Programmers IO is training all the developers on where to be careful when they're trying to use tools like ChatGPT or Gemini, or even GitHub Copilot. Microsoft also giving like
Yeah.
Copilot in Visual Studio. All these things have one common problem is they are there to help you, not do your work. So that
Yeah.
distinction is the key, and adjust the developer mindset to that. And I don't want to hear our strict enforcement is I don't want to hear that I got some code like ChatGPT wrote that code and it doesn't work. Then you didn't do your work, right? No,
Yeah, and
like
I think that's one of the great things you say. The example that Anders took us through yesterday was brilliant in the fact that he had an idea of what he wanted to do, and the first thing he did was he built his JSON data structure. He said exactly what he wanted the JSON structure to look like. And he then said, hey, now using this structure, generate me up a batch of test data so I can then build and prototype and get going quickly. Now give me a store to feed this into that I can then later replace with the kind of live feed that I'm going to build from the backend later on. So he was able to, with a vision about what he was trying to do, use it to speed up the whole prototyping, but still using his developer experience to make sure that the code that he was producing was manageable, maintainable, was practical, was readable. So I think a good developer can help use tools like that to help just take some of the grunt work out the way. The stuff that in the past you probably sit at your keyboard and put some music on in your headphones and go, right, this is going to be boring for 20 minutes, but I've just got to get it done. You can now get it done very, very quickly, and that can help keep you moving, which allows you to focus on the customer requirements and the kind of the core user functionality that you need to provide into the applications that you're building, and let you be kind of the artist that developers need to be a little bit in terms of when you're putting in and bringing this kind of stuff together, which is pretty cool.
yes. And Stephen, I would say you said it right, and your British accent makes it much more better sounding.
I think we're both saying the same things on just it makes it makes a lot of sense to use it.
Yes.
I don't do a lot of Java development, but I had recently the need to do some Java development, um, and it was brilliant being able to use ChatGPT to say, hey, look, I need to do this. Go generate me some code. Oh, that's the bit of syntax that I was missing. It's 5 years
Yes.
since I had to develop Java before, so great. But still, when you're going down it, being able to go, hey, look, you're using this library here. Can we switch it up and use this other one from Apache instead? Oh yeah, sure, here you go. Oh great, thanks. Copy, paste, it works. And then needing to, oh, I need to do this now. I need to use a regular expression. I need to be able to put these values in. I need to be able to split this and that. Here's a few examples of what I want to test it against. And you can just say, hey, look, using these, give me this a function to do this method. And then you can ask it to then test that function for you with a number of different inputs and show me what the outputs are going to be. So you can actually almost get it to do a pre-unit test ahead of time, which again saves just a few cycles in terms of working through and getting it going. And then you can say, hey, now generate me a unit test. So, if you know what you're doing and you know your craft, you can be very, very clever in terms of how you pick up and use this stuff, which is really cool.
Yes. And with the whole the advent of these new tools, like as powerful as they are, like since last year, it's incredible progress in that space. But at
Mm,
the end, what I've seen from my from the history, right? Like it's going to create more opportunities for good developers and bad developers, like who are just barely like, oh, I call themselves developers, but like do bad coding. They don't understand much. They're going to have hard time.
yeah,
Uh, and that scenario, what you explained, like especially we have been using at several of our clients, generate like unit tests and automated test scripts using GitHub Copilot. That's actually very useful and cutting down on a lot of time
mm,
because writing test scripts is boring, and that's where you're like it's actually easing up and adding a lot of value for us. For the regular
yeah.
application code itself, uh, it's hit or miss. For a good developer can use it like very well, but for others, like it's frustrating that like it takes more time to understand what ChatGPT has produced than they could
Yeah,
write their own code.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's the thing that I've learned playing with it is sometimes if you've got something specific that you want to do, then ask it the question and get something small back that you can then quickly check and validate and move on, and use it for things that are kind of going to take a bit of time to do that are just going to take a bit of time because they're kind of boring and repetitive. And yeah, that makes it really kind of sing through. So I've got a very slightly different question here from Oleg, who's asking, how is the pay for JavaScript developers compared to other languages? Since it is an open source language, does it decrease their value since it is open to everyone and everyone around the world? Um, do you want to have a go at that one first, and I might add some comments
Yeah,
as well.
pay of the JavaScript developers, uh, you know, uh, that's a tricky question because it depends on what they're doing, right? So we have JavaScript developers like working on PHP projects like in a simple web development, website development to some of the advanced ERP development, the full stack developers. There's a night and day difference in how they project. It's not like given like it's not as smooth, like defined, well defined as a .NET developer, like who is like server side developer versus like Python server side or the analytics developer in Python. They have like pretty it's well defined. But for the JavaScript, it's just all over. Mm, TypeScript and JavaScript. So it's a role what they are performing, where they are in, defines their pay. Is that the question
Yeah, I,
related to the
I, I,
question?
I would completely agree with you. I think a good developer who knows what they're doing will get a lot of stuff done in a lot quicker time than somebody who's quite junior and new in. I think that doesn't matter which language you're using, that's just a fact. And when you're building larger, more complex business applications, and you need to have that view and understanding of what the business is trying to do, that comes with experience. It comes with time spent listening, talking to users, that you just don't have on day one leaving school coming into a job. So I think there's lots of factors that to go into how much a developer gets paid. But I think the kind of going back to the part there about if it's an open source language or not. I think one of the things that people often kind of look at when they're trying to build things is they go, well, open source stuff is free, so I could use loads of open source stuff here, and it's not going to cost me anything. And I think that's kind of a bit of a false prophecy, because sometimes what you're building into your projects then is a technical debt. If you are bringing together lots of different open source components because you want to use lots of different things, because they're open source, how well are they being maintained? There's popular libraries out there that are being well maintained. There's also some that kind of become a fad for a little bit and then disappear. With lots of different open source libraries, you're going to then be having a whole load of different licenses that you need to manage. You need to check those licenses to make sure that you don't, if you put one component into your stack that has a license that means you need to share the source code for your entire project if you use this, as a business, that's a pretty major thing that you might want to steer clear of. So again, being aware of the different licenses and the management of them, that's a lot of time that you need to start looking into. And quite honestly, that's why a lot of people start looking at things like Sencha, where you've got 140 odd components fully integrated in together that you just dump in. It's tested across all the different browsers. You haven't got all that pain of making sure the different browser compatibilities are there. It's got the modern and the classic framework, so you can do it for modern, for kind of mobile and touch screens as well as desktop applications. It's got all the theming integrated together. It's got all the component stuff that you'd expect from a well-matured library, all under a single license. So yeah, there is a cost to having Sencha as a component set, but compared to the ongoing management and the risks and everything else that goes along with it, by trying to build up and set up your own and managing that, and the time that you have to spend on managing that, it's actually quite often easier and cheaper to buy a Sencha license if you're doing a big project. So there's always things to weigh up in different ways when you're looking at what you're trying to build your stack against and what you're trying to bring in and use. So and that comes down to the same with languages as well.
That's
JavaScript is an open source language. Sorry, yeah, go on.
that's well said. Like, that's one of the things like a lot of people miss. Like, oh, should I spend $1,000 on the license versus like, can I get that same open source version or like, something available in the open source? What people are not missing out is that $1,000 you are spending on the license is actually a result of somebody spending $1 million and divide by 1,000 different customers. So you are just not spending. If not, like if you pick that up and like try to figure out you're spending that on yourself, it will be a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So
Well,
so
the way I
that's
look at it,
yeah,
if I'm going to spend a week trying to work on the stuff, that's
yeah,
it's worth the
exactly.
money. So
Yeah, exactly.
um, and also by doing that, you then have something that is professionally supported, that you've got the backup. As things change on the market, new browsers come out, new supports coming out, all that work that you would have to go back and do again is being taken care of for you. All the compatibility stuff and everything is all in play. You haven't got all that management keep going. Oh yeah, it's just I'm kind of I like an easy life. There's things that are kind of I'd much rather spend time on focusing on customer requirements and getting some stuff built and getting paid for that rather than just trying to keep a disparate stack pulled together. So, we've got to also within the Idea group. There's Delphi, which is a fantastic programming language. The difference there in JavaScript obviously is a web application framework library for using the browsers. Delphi is used to build compiled native applications. You spoke earlier about there's things that you wouldn't build with JavaScript because of the types safety and and the variances that go around that. And certainly there's certain apps that you probably, if you're building for mobile and you want to build a banking application, you want something that is very secure and where you don't have libraries that are deployed out that can be modified and edited and potentially be passed through. Again, there's certain applications you want to build with compiled native apps. So I think as a developer, it's always about having the right tool belt, if that makes sense, and being aware of the different frameworks and libraries out there. So yeah, if I was going to build a native mobile application, I'd probably quite honestly build one with Delphi, because I know I can build it once and get it onto iOS and Android at a flash of a pan with full native support. But if I need to have a web application, then JavaScript would be a fantastic option to look at building with. And I think it's really interesting. You mentioned earlier the kind of the whole thing around low code and looking at low code as kind of a trend that's kind of coming through, and people you kind of wanting to push in that kind of direction. It's a very, very interesting area, because I think certainly even for JavaScript developers, we're often looking at how we can do kind of low code approach to doing things. And I think there's a difference in this thought pattern around kind of low code and no code. There's a number of platforms that are now coming out into the market. Microsoft have been pushing their kind of add-ons for their suites, for where anybody can be a developer and build something with a drag and drop environments and get stuff going. But you very soon kind of run into barriers around what you can actually physically achieve using those approaches. And I think the low code approach, where you're using well thought out and developed and set up components that you can use, even if the JavaScript components or whatever, taking all that work that's would have been done and being able to reuse it project after project is a great way to be able to pick up and get going and move forward.
That's a solution providers, right? Like, I
Yeah.
would think, and most of the people on the call, probably are interested in how do we generate more opportunities, and that's the focus area, right?
Yeah.
So in low code, basically, most people, what I notice is like they try to do drag and drop, they can't do it, they can't move forward, and then they give up, saying like, hey, you can't do this thing with this. Rather provide that way to say like, oh, it's easy, just basically, you need to put the code in here so that it moves to the next step, and you remove that barriers. And as people are getting confident, saying like, oh, we can build this, oh, this is easy, this will only take about a week, let's build some application instead of doing it manually. That confidence, what we saw is over a period of time, in a year or so, the same team starts pushing more and more projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked with a team they never had a project, never actually entertained any software development. They were doing manually most of their life. Suddenly, within we started pushing out the apps using Teams. A year later, we had about 15 projects running supporting that team. So within a year, from 0 to 15 projects, they were asking more. Can we do this? Can we do that? Is nobody wants to do the new work, right? They want to do everything efficiently. But that change in confidence is what I was talking about. But when you come to the professional developers, most of us will figure out how to do it, right? But it's about are you giving that confidence that we will figure that out to the business users? Was my point about how do you bridge that gap, building confidence with these technologies and platforms? Do they understand what we do? And how do you, when you go to your customer, it's about I will do that for you versus, oh, even you can do it. And here is how, let me show you. Let me help you build that confidence is where it matters. Again, I'm not expecting a accountant to be proficient in JavaScript or in Python or anything, but just having that understanding, providing will actually build confidence that we can actually build an application and that generates a project for us, that provides opportunities for us, professional developers.
Yeah,
So
but it's a very interesting area. I've certainly seen, I've worked at companies in the past where we've seen people come in and go, right, well, we're trying out this new way of being able to build stuff with a no-code approach. And I think that's the big difference, is when you've got a no-code approach, you're kind of very much tied to what you can do. And they start letting anybody kind of start building kind of little apps. And the people who are a little bit more technically savvy kind of go, oh, I need to do something, and they start building a little app up. And it then becomes part of the workflows of what people are doing. But I think one of the big danger points here, and why it's really important to make sure that you keep professional developers involved around it, is that you then end up with a workflow that is reliant on this kind of one little bit of an app. But it kind of, you're then having to license everybody to access into that system. You've got to be really careful with some of the low-code systems in terms of where the runtime licensing is involved, because sometimes the scale of it is a major challenge.
Oh, that quickly adds up. Licensing is the key sticking
Yeah,
point, and
yeah,
you have to draw a line of okay, what are the use cases? If there are only 3 users for a specific application, then low code works perfect, right? But
yeah.
they have 10,000 users. Now add a 10,000 into $30 per user license fee. Now you building off application full-fledged full stack application in JavaScript using EXTJS. Sencha would be a far more economical approach, and it will just
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, and
Hmm.
the cost of ownership would be far less in the year, even in the year one, compared to a low code app.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is a big thing to watch out for. It's a great way to kind of seed and kind of get people interested in things. But I think that's one of the reasons why we saw things like yesterday. Mark Guzmano took us through the new Rapid XJS that's coming through. Brilliant plugin for Visual Studio Code that allows developers to kind of help prototype apps up a lot quicker. Um, and yeah, if you're ever needing to build any backends, get some data served out to feed into your applications, then the ultimate low-code approach for doing that would be to use something like RAD Server, which is part of the Embarcadero product set, where you can literally connect up to most data sources, and then just tell it, hey, turn this into a REST endpoint for me, and hit run, and you've then got a data endpoint that you can do your post, push, deletes, everything back and forward to, and turn the database into a full REST endpoint. And that's super easy to kind of get up and running, and then you can feed directly into your data models with Sencha. So yeah, loads and loads of stuff around. Again, it's always about getting out and having a play with all these different things. So
Absolutely.
cool.
Mm.
Okay, we've got about 2 minutes to the top of the hour. So been some really interesting stuff that this has kind of kicked off as a conversation point. It's been brilliant session. Thank you very much for that. A number of comments coming through saying, thank you. It's always great to kind of get these kind of conversation things where we pick up and learn and discuss different stuff. So well done for that. Anything that you want to kind of close off with before we get ready into the next session?
No, thank you. This was the further discussion was great, and I'm excited with my journey, and everybody, I wish you all good luck. It's a great one.
Brilliant. Super. Thank you very much.